my god, does he know how to get sturdy? Does he know the method? No way he knows the method. No way he...
Hello everyone and welcome to a very different video to my usual. My name's Airblue and yes, it's been 5 months since my last upload. But one particular topic about a particular game has gotten me so fired up that I just had to come back. And that topic is the region of Genshin Impact's Natlan. Now I know this topic has been beaten like a dead horse ever since Natlan's release. However, I feel like this time it genuinely has some merit behind it, and I felt it would be interesting to share my own opinions as well as discuss and hear yours. Lastly, this video has spoilers for 5.3's Act 5 Archon quest, so I would recommend finishing that before watching my video. This video will be my opinion alone, and you're completely allowed to agree or disagree. All I ask is that you be civil in the comments. And without further ado, let's jump into my first point, Natlan's general world building and story. If you remember the glory days of just before Natlan's release, you would know how many people in the community were imagining this region to be isolated and war-ridden, full of lava, death, and destruction. Which, while that's a little predictable, is actually a lot more in line with the story its Archon quest tried to tell. And instead we got this. Lush mountains, cute Pokemon-esque birds that you can possess, technologically advanced tribes where everybody uses guns and DJ sets and motorcycles and... oh wait. While these elements of Natlan aren't necessarily bad, it's the fact that the way the world is presented doesn't line up with its narrative at all. With how we're first introduced to the region, you would expect for the traveler to find a Natlan stripped of its previous power, color, and determination, and slowly have to rebuild it from the ground up, being introduced to each tribe and their struggles along the way. Instead, upon arrival, everything's colorful, everyone's happy, and the power of friendship saves the day. However, you could argue Natlan is more effective by showing you how well every tribe is doing before their impending doom. While we do have an entire section of the Archon quest dedicated to fighting back the Abyss and witnessing how our decisions affected other people, I found myself not being able to care much about the random NPCs. Meanwhile, the death of Chaska's sister actually left a bigger impact, and even plays into the story by awakening her as a hero of Natlan. It would be cool to have seen more stakes like this. It just feels like almost every playable character is confident and strong with no drawbacks or losses after the war ends. It's just wild to me how Natlan is supposed to be all about tight-knit friendships and uniting for the final battle. However, when that battle actually comes, it's only yourself and Mavuika actually working together. I also wish the rebuilding of the tribes was longer and went into better detail on how this affected those who lost their homes or their family, because that quest with the ensign finished before it barely even started. I don't think PTSD can be cured just by talking to someone for a few minutes. This sentiment also carries over to the very end of Natlan's Archon quest, where personally I felt Capitano's death in particular came to a very abrupt end. You're telling me they sacrificed the goat himself, and he doesn't come back? I mean, surely he'll come back, right guys? Right. While we knew Mavuika was in danger of sacrificing herself from the very beginning, Genshin has this rule where they can't kill off any playable characters, so you can never really feel afraid for her well-being. The same with Kachina when she was banished into the Shadow Realm. We knew she would come back unharmed, so why would you even worry in the first place? I just think it hurts the storytelling having an entire arc centered around Mavuika sacrificing herself, when we know that's not going to happen. Although it was clearly better for the state of Natlan for the captain to die instead of the Archon, you would think, with all her recklessness and determination, that she would at least try to fight back. This way, it would feel like less of a cop-out and also show us Mavuika's personality instead of telling us. This only adds to the shallow perfection that she's represented as. She can be selfless, confident, strong, intellectual, a talented painter, willing to sacrifice herself multiple times, be friends with the whole nation who look up to her no matter what. the list goes on. I've seen the argument that Capitano's just as much a Mary Sue as Mavuika is, or that she doesn't count as a Mary Sue at all. By definition, a Mary Sue is a type of fictional character who is portrayed as free of weaknesses or character flaws. While you may think Mavuika can't be a Mary Sue due to the fact that she is a so-called reckless leader, considering none of her apparent flaws end up actually harming anybody, this only counts as a flaw if the narrative reflects this as a bad thing. Secondly, while the captain does share many character traits with Mavuika, such as unyielding loyalty and compassion to their people, he has the moral ambiguity that comes with being part of the Fatui. This already made him more interesting as a first impression, at least to me, making me wonder what his original intent was for joining them. Aside from this mystery, his history of being cursed with immortality as a result of being a pure-blooded Khaenri'ahn is already a really intriguing storyline. Him wanting to escape this fate while saving souls of his past dead comrades makes sense for his character traits and makes us empathize with him. Not to mention, he did lose the fight against Mavuika, so he's not eternally strong. While I do sympathize with Mavuika's backstory, especially having to leave her sister, I felt it was slightly brushed over and that it didn't really affect her or make her act out in any meaningful ways. While this could be because of her personality and how she has to act as the Pyro Archon, I still feel like there could be some elements hidden beneath the facade that could just point to this affecting her a bit more. When we compare her to the other Archons we've met, she really doesn't have many flaws at all. For instance, we have A, who, distraught by the loss of her sister, purged her nation into a lockdown in which she calls eternal peace. It's almost funny how the one human Archon is the one that feels the most godlike. But enough yapping about the storytelling, it's time to move on to my next point, and that would be character designs. This topic is one I'm very passionate about, and I'm curious what other people think of it, so comment your opinions below. Again, these are my own opinions, and if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. Now, designs are very important to me as someone who's currently studying a Bachelor of Arts in relation to concepting and designing characters for games. So for Natlan's designs to flop this hard when compared to other nations, it's really quite upsetting. Now my first point might be a little controversial, and I don't want to be that guy, but it is pretty interesting how not a single playable character in Natlan is darker than just a slight tan in a nation with South American, West African, and Mesoamerican influences. Yet the enemy NPCs are allowed to have a diverse range of skin tones. While you can say there are more things to care about than skin color and that that's not all that represents a culture, or that Teyvat has its own laws and isn't fully based on real life, Genshin capitalizes on taking inspiration from real life cultures and also advertises themselves as a global game, yet the only dark-skinned characters we have are 4 stars with underwhelming kits? Unless we're counting Dea, I guess. There's no diversity. Where are all of the people who were stating Sumeru characters are pale because they live in a shaded rainforest with no sunlight? Like, do you seriously think melanin just disappears when you're inside for a few days? But I digress. With the Ensign, I feel like her design is the standpoint for what most people expected out of Natlan's designs, considering she was marketed all the way back in 2020. And honestly, I like her design a lot, but it definitely shows a different style compared to the newer aesthetic Natlan leans towards, which makes me wonder if Hoyo changed their ideas for the region. Now I know Mavuika was my main gripe with the storyline, however I do still have some things to say about her design. By looking at her, you can already tell how out of place this design is with the rest of Genshin Impact. While I think her fiery hair is really cool and her eyes have a sun motif, the latex biker suit just really isn't doing it for me. I shouldn't even have to mention the crotch zipper and these random nonsensical cutouts. While I'm not saying these cutouts can't be found on a plethora of other characters, it just feels rather tasteless for the Archon of War to be one attack away from a nip slip. I know the Raiden Shogun also shows cleavage, however you can kind of get around it by saying, where else is she gonna pull a sword out of her boobas? I mean, her heart. The modern motorbike being used to mow down enemies just feels so out of place from the rest of the world. While Natlan is supposed to feel different from every other region, it could be done in so many other ways than this. How am I supposed to believe roller skates and flying guns and motorbikes are being used while Mondstadt is supposedly traveling by horse and cart? This isn't to say Natlan and its characters aren't fun gameplay-wise, and in the end, that's mainly what the game is trying to sell. I mean, who doesn't love speeding around on a motorbike, riding up mountains in roller skates, flying through the sky on a gun, or swinging like Spider-Man? These mechanics are fun, but the problem I'm addressing in this video is the narrative and how these actually fit in. It's one thing to have fun gameplay, and another to have a cohesive narrative that makes players satisfied. I see the argument thrown around a lot that Natlan's technology does make sense for being region locked, but for one, isn't Fontaine said to be the most technologically advanced region? And two, every other type of technology has a believable explanation behind it. For example, Fontaine's mechs are reminiscent of steampunk England and industrial era France, running on arc energy. This energy is also what Fontaine characters use in combat, so it feels cohesive. We also have Sumeru's advanced brain Google and Dendro AirPods. These are powered through Nahida's Gnosis itself, and a huge amount of Sumeru's population are known to use these. However, with Natlan, the technology we see the playable characters use are only used by them, with barely a mention of it outside of that. Like, is nobody seeing a flying gun and thinking, damn, that shit would be fire against the abyss? Surely if Xilonen were this good of an inventor, it would be spreading across Tevat like wildfire and everyone would want this technology. But not even the NPCs of Natlan get this treatment. Speaking of Xilonen, while I think her design is pretty, it's interesting to see denim shorts and roller skates on a DJ blacksmith. It's just hard to tell anything about her character just from the way she dresses, which is often a less good design to me. We also have Chaska, who has these very interesting half pants going on.
What the hell is even that?
In a region with a very hot climate, so I guess one side she'll just be airing out and the other she'll just be sweating like hell. Not to mention the bowling ball shading on her cheeks. And I don't even need to start on the flying gun. Now I know I kinda sound like a woman hater, but I am about to dunk on Kenichi. I think his design is kind of atrocious. Aside from the random pixel elements and interesting color scheme, I think the worst offender is a Hao, which surprisingly isn't really an unpopular opinion from what I've seen. I genuinely don't know what Hoyoverse HQ was thinking to create a Zenless Zone Zero character and then just chuck him into Genshin. His entire kit consists of 8-bit pixel graphics and sound effects with no comprehensible reason why. And whilst I love their character dynamics, why can't they have just made a Hao similar to Oz, where he could just be a miniature version of himself stripped of his original power? Just anything aside from this Xbox 360 ass design. Now with the remaining Natlan characters, I feel like they're nowhere near the level of their other offenders. For example, Kachina looks fine, her technology aligns with her tribe at least and makes sense of something they'd use, and the color palette is more on the muted side and matches the browns and yellows of her geo-based tribe. I do believe Sitlali and Auroron aren't that bad either. They do have some modern elements such as the ripped emo Hot Topic jeans, but aside from that, I think their outfits aren't too far-fetched from other regional outfits we've seen. Next is Mualani, whose personality I really love, although I can admit she looks quite out of place with the rest of the game. This modern swimsuit on a character known for constantly going to war against the abyss is definitely jarring, but she's always surfing, so it does make sense why she's wearing a swimsuit. Despite the amount of skin she's showing, she doesn't come off as over-sexualized to me at all. There's no focal point bringing you to look at her chest or thigh area, unlike someone like Mona, who, while wearing a swimsuit that covers her whole body, is made to show off specific assets that don't do her character's portrayal justice at all. Meanwhile, I can easily tell Mualani's personality just through the fun colors and cute details. I just wish there were more elements of how combat affected her, maybe just a few scars or even bandages, but at the end of the day, this is a gacha game, and they're trying to sell these characters to you. Now on to our final character. I do have a few things to say about her, to say the least, and honestly I believe it might be the worst we've had so far. Feel completely free to disagree, but this time I'm talking about our most recent character to be drip marketed, aka Varessa.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
she somehow manages to achieve a different aesthetic compared to every other Natlan character, which deserves a medal considering how out of place they already felt to other nations. She seems to be based off of a lucha libre wrestler. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm British, that's self-explanatory. However, if you compare the two, they still have nothing in common. The heart elements, minuscule skirt, and Y2K leg warmers just seem so odd for someone to be wearing in Natlan. Somehow we have a modern day Gyaru VTuber, which shares more of Inazuma's design philosophy. Now I will say, I love her English voiceover and the confidence it gives her. However, this actually clashes really badly with her cutesy, clumsy animations. Natlan just seems to have a habit of adding too many elements to their characters, like a 12-year-old DeviantArt OC. On another note, they made her whole personality all about food. They'd choose to make her the first chubbier character, right? Except she's really not. Of course they kept her waist, neck, and arms skinny. But apparently in Genshin standards this is body positivity. Slamming enemies with your colossal cheeks only to fall over and get up like a toddler. Professional wrestler, by the way. I did hear she needs to unleash her mask in her ultimate form to fight better, but that doesn't make it any less cringy to watch. While these pieces of her design aren't inherently sexual, it's the combination of them which comes off a little obvious to who she's catering towards. Of course you can love Varessa and find her design cute. I myself do like individual areas of it, just not combined, and definitely not for Genshin. She really looks like a character from Zenless Zone Zero. I also may be slightly salty about how she's a 5-star and pretty much took the place Yansan could have had. It's just a little funny how Yansan and Aoife are both 4 stars and just so happen to be the darkest playable characters of Natlan. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence, right guys? Even though I may sound harsh talking about this, I'm not saying this is the first instance of fan service we've had in Genshin. Fan service has always been in the game since 1.0, but it feels like ever since Natlan, Hoyoverse seemed to crank it up significantly. Whether it's as minor as changing the facial expressions of Citlali when talking to Aether or Lumine, or Mizuki's butt ultimate, and essentially the ending of her story quest where you're kind of not really on a date. Most of the discourse from my understanding is that Hoyo's newer designs seem to be catering towards their male fanbase, otherwise known as the male gaze. It also doesn't help that Kanich was the only new male 5-star in an entire year, with Auroron and Aoife later being 4 stars. Basically a giant fuck you to any of the husbando enjoyers out there. Honestly, it makes you wonder what anyone gets out of these marketing decisions other than a huge angry mob of fans now quitting the game. And no, you're not helping anybody by telling these fans to just quit the game and go and play Love in Deep Space. The only way to fix this problem is through equality in the number of male characters, but also in their designs, kits, and interactions with the traveler. Now onto my third main point of this video. Pulling the 5-star characters for this region makes exploring so much better and fluid that it almost feels like a tactic just to make you spend on them. Whilst we can't possess these birds and use them to explore, they do feel very janky. It also sucks that Natlan characters are nowhere near as good exploration-wise outside of their region, or even how Mavuika heavily relies on another Natlan teammate, noticeably a 5-star Citlali, to perform at what should be her base level. I won't even get into the recent event where you essentially needed Mavuika if you really wanted the name card reward. Now why are all of the points I made necessarily bad for Genshin's future? Simply because Natlan is seemingly trying to attract a different audience to its previous player base. Most of the complaints, as you can see from Natlan, is how different the game feels. I feel players with this sentiment have every right to be annoyed about these decisions, especially with Snezhnaya being the next upcoming region, which is a region crucial to the entirety of Genshin's main storyline. Could you imagine if the Tsaritsa, who is said to be intimidating and can grant delusions, ends up wearing a horribly skimpy outfit with the excuse that the nation is permanently warmed up by magical eaters? I would be pretty pissed off too. The only thing us players can hope for is that our feedback may cause future decisions to change, but I guess that relies on how well these quote-unquote gooner characters sell. We can really only wait and see how 6.0 goes. And with that being said, this brings me to my conclusion. Whether it means taking well-needed burnout breaks,
Observe as the master masterfully rolls the artifact. Okay, that's a miss, but I mean, it could still be good.
moving on to other games, or just pulling for all the characters you do like, it's entirely up to you how you react to the Natlan incident, but personally, I think this nation completely flopped, at least after the peak we reached during Fontaine. I'm ready and excited to move on to a Mondstadt expansion in Snezhnaya, but also rightfully worried. Anyways, thank you so much if you made it this far in the video, and feel free to give it a like or even subscribe if you enjoyed this content. I would really love to hear your opinions in the comments below, so feel free to yap on to your heart's content. I will read them all. And finally, I do have a growing Discord server where we talk about other gacha games, including Honkai Star Rail, Twisted Wonderland, Ensemble Stars, and many more. The link will be in the description below. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in another 5 months.